The cold emptiness of space stretched endlessly around the UES Defiance. The massive warship drifted silently through the dark void between galaxies, its hull scarred from countless battles and 3 centuries of wandering. Inside the ship, most of the crew slept in hibernation pods, waiting for their turn to wake and continue humanity's desperate mission. Admiral Kim Jae-ho walked slowly through the empty corridors of his ship. His footsteps echoed in the silence as he made his way to the bridge. At 60 years old, he looked much older than his age. The weight of leading humanity's last hope had aged him beyond his years. His black hair had turned completely gray, and deep lines marked his face from decades of worry and responsibility. Jae-ho had been just a young officer when the Galactic Council passed their terrible judgment. 300 years ago, they had declared humanity too dangerous to exist among the civilized species of the galaxy. The Council claimed humans were violent, unpredictable, and could not be trusted. They built massive energy barriers around Earth's solar system, trapping humanity inside like prisoners in their own home. The Defiance had been humanity's last military ship to escape before the barriers went up. Jae-ho's grandfather had been the captain then, tasked with finding allies who might help humanity prove their worth. When his grandfather died, Jae-ho's father took command. Now, it was Jae-ho's turn to carry the burden of his family's mission. The ship carried 847 souls, all volunteers who had given up everything to search for a way to free their people. They rotated in and out of hibernation, taking turns to stay awake and maintain the ship. Some crew members had been born on the Defiance and had never seen Earth, yet they all shared the same dream of returning home and proving that humans deserved their place among the stars. On the bridge, Lieutenant Park Mingi was monitoring the long-range sensors. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that still held hope despite their endless journey. Her family had served on the Defiance for 3 generations, just like Jae-ho's. She looked up as the Admiral entered. "Any news from the outer systems?" Jae-ho asked, settling into his command chair. The leather was worn smooth from decades of use. "Nothing yet, sir. The same empty signals we've been getting for months." Mingi's voice carried disappointment. They had been searching this sector for signs of intelligent life, hoping to find species that might listen to humanity's side of the story. Jae-ho nodded and stared out at the stars through the main view screen. Somewhere far behind them, Earth waited. He wondered if his people still remembered the Defiance and its crew. Did they still believe that salvation might come from the depths of space? Or had they given up hope after 3 centuries of silence? The ship's AI, Artemis, suddenly spoke in its calm female voice. "Admiral, I am detecting an energy signature at the edge of sensor range. The pattern appears to be consistent with Cathari technology." Jae-ho straightened in his chair. The Cathari were one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Council. They were a hive-minded race that thought with one collective consciousness. During the war that led to humanity's banishment, the Cathari had been humanity's strongest enemies. "Show me," Jae-ho ordered. The main screen flickered and displayed a distant view of space. At first, Jae-ho saw nothing unusual. Then Artemis highlighted 2 objects moving through the darkness. One was clearly a Cathari dreadnought, its bioorganic hull gleaming with a sickly green light. The massive ship was 3 times larger than the Defiance, covered in weapon pods that looked like infected growths. The second object was much smaller and appeared to be running from the dreadnought. As the sensors focused, Jae-ho could see it was a colony ship of some kind. Its hull was different from any design he recognized, painted in soft blue and white colors that seemed peaceful compared to the aggressive black and green of the Cathari. "Vessel, the smaller ship is transmitting distress signals," Mingi reported, her fingers dancing over her control panel. "They're asking for help. The transmission is in. I think it's Vailani." Jae-ho's heart jumped. The Vailani were a gentle species, known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and kindness. During humanity's trial before the Galactic Council, the Vailani had been the only species to speak in favor of humans. They had argued that humanity deserved a chance to prove they could change, that banishment was too harsh a punishment. The Council had ignored their pleas, Now, a Vaylani colony ship was under attack, and the Defiance was the only vessel close enough to help. But getting involved would mean revealing their position to the Kethari. It would mean breaking 3 centuries of hiding and risking everything they had worked for. Jiho watched as the Cathari dreadnought fired its weapons. Streams of green energy struck the colony ship, and he saw pieces of hull break away and drift into space. The Vaylani ship was defenseless, carrying families who had probably never seen a weapon in their lives. The admiral closed his eyes and thought of his grandfather's words, spoken so long ago. Sometimes, Jiho, being human means doing what's right, even when it costs everything. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made. Admiral Kim Ji-ho stood from his command chair, his decision made. The bridge crew looked at him with understanding in their eyes. They all knew what this moment meant. After 300 years of hiding, the Defiance was about to reveal itself to fight for strangers who had once tried to help humanity. All hands to battle stations, Jiho announced over the ship's communication system. Throughout the Defiance, sleeping crew members began waking from their hibernation pods. The ship that had been quiet and dark suddenly came alive with activity as hundreds of people prepared for what might be their final battle. Commander Park Minji moved to the weapons station. Her fingers flew over the controls as she brought the ship's guns online. The Defiance had been built for war, and despite its age, it still carried enough firepower to fight much larger ships. Its weapons had been designed by human engineers who understood that sometimes smaller ships needed to defeat bigger ones through cleverness rather than raw power. Lieutenant Lee Dong-yoon took his position at the tactical station. He was the ship's expert on alien technology, having studied every piece of information they had gathered during their long journey. His job was to find weaknesses in enemy ships and exploit them. "Sir, the Cathari dreadnought is called the Terminus Swarm Dong-yoon," reported, reading data from his screens. "It's a bioship, grown rather than built. The hull can repair itself, but it has weak points where the organic sections connect." Jiho nodded. Bioships were dangerous because they could heal damage, but they also had vulnerabilities that metal ships did not. "What about the colony ship?" "It's the Peaceful Dawn," Minji answered. 3,000 Vaylani civilians aboard, including many children. Their life support systems are failing from the damage. The admiral felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. 3,000 innocent lives hung in the balance, and his crew of 847 was their only hope. "Take us in," he ordered. "Maximum speed." The Defiance dropped out of its hiding position and accelerated toward the battle. The ship's engines, silent for so long, roared to life with blue flames that lit up the darkness of space. For the first time in centuries, a human warship was moving to attack. The Cathari dreadnought noticed them immediately. Captain Vextar of the Hive Mind Collective sent a transmission to the Defiance. The alien's voice was cold and emotionless, speaking for thousands of minds that thought as one. "Human vessel, you are in violation of galactic law. Your species is banned from this sector. Draw immediately or be destroyed." Jiho looked at the image of the Kethari captain on his screen. Vextar looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected light like black mirrors. The creature's mandibles clicked as it spoke, and Jiho could see other Cathari moving in the background of the transmission. "This is Admiral Kim Ji-ho of the United Earthship Defiance," he replied calmly. "We cannot allow you to attack defenseless civilians. Stand down and let the colony ship go." Vextar's mandibles clicked faster, showing anger. "Humans have no authority here. You will retreat or face the consequences of your interference." The transmission ended, and immediately the Terminus Swarm turned its massive bulk toward the Defiance. The bioship was truly enormous, covered in weapon pods that looked like tumors growing from its hull. Each pod contained biocannons that could fire streams of acid capable of dissolving metal at the molecular level. "Here they come," Dong-yoon announced as the Cathari ship began firing. Green streams of deadly energy reached across space toward the Defiance. Minji skillfully piloted the ship in a twisting pattern, avoiding most of the shots. The few that hit were absorbed by the ship's shields, but Ji-Ho could see the energy barriers flickering under the assault. "Return fire," he ordered. The Defiance unleashed its own weapons. Blue beams of concentrated energy struck the dreadnought's hull, burning through the organic armor. But as Dong-Yun had warned, the bioship began healing itself almost immediately, growing new tissue to replace what had been destroyed. "We need to hit them harder and faster than they can heal," Minji said, sweat beading on her forehead as she concentrated on flying the ship. Ji-Ho studied the tactical display, thinking quickly. The Cathari had one major weakness that humans had. Learned during their long war? The hive mind made them powerful when working together, but it also made them predictable. They always attacked in patterns because thousands of minds thinking as one could not be creative the way individual minds could be. "Dong-Yun, what's the status on the colony ship?" he asked. "Life support failing fast, sir? Maybe 10 minutes? Before they start losing people?" 10 minutes. Ji-Ho made his choice. "Minji, I need you to put us between the dreadnought and the colony ship. Use our hull as a shield." His commander looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, that will expose us to everything." "They have." "I know," Ji-Ho said quietly. "But those people trusted us once. Now it's time to prove they were right." The Defiance moved into position, placing itself directly in the path of the Cathari weapons. Green death rained down on the human ship, and alarms began screaming as systems failed throughout the vessel. The explosion of the Defiance lit up the darkness of space like a new star being born. For a few seconds, the brilliant flash was visible from several light-years away. Then the light faded, leaving only debris floating where humanity's last warship had made its final stand. Captain Song. Yuna of the Veilani colony ship, Peaceful Dawn, watched the destruction with tears streaming down her face. The human ship had saved her people by ramming itself into the Cathari dreadnought's core, destroying both vessels in a massive explosion. 3,000 Veilani civilians were alive because 847 humans had chosen to sacrifice themselves for strangers. Yuna was a tall, graceful being with silver skin that shimmered in the light of her ship's bridge. Like all Veilani, she had large, kind eyes that reflected deep wisdom. Her people were known throughout the galaxy as peacekeepers and philosophers, beings who valued life above all else. They rarely fought, preferring to solve problems through talking and understanding. "Send a message to the Veilani Council immediately," Yuna ordered her communications officer. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humans died to save us." The message traveled through space at faster than light speed, reaching the Veilani homeworld within hours. The Council of Elders gathered to hear Yuna's report, and when they learned of the human sacrifice, they made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Elder Thren, the oldest and wisest of the Veilani leaders, stood before the Galactic Communication Network. His voice was transmitted to every civilized world in the galaxy as he spoke about what had happened in the deep space between star systems. "My fellow beings," Thren began, his words carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. "Today we learned something important about the species we cast out 300 years ago. A human warship found our colony ship under attack by Cathari. Forces these humans could have hidden, could have saved themselves. Instead, they chose to fight and die so that our people might live." The message spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. On 1,000 different worlds, beings of hundreds of different species heard the story of the Defiance and its crew. Many had never heard of humans before, or remembered them only as the violent species that had been banished long ago. But now they heard a different story. They heard about Admiral Kim Ji-Ho, who had given up his life to save strangers. They heard about Commander Park Minji, who had piloted her ship into certain death. They heard about the 847 crew members who had voted unanimously to sacrifice themselves for people they had never met. On the crystal world of Zephyros, the crystalline beings who made up the Zephyrian Republic began to discuss the human sacrifice. The Zephyrians were a logical species who made decisions based on facts and evidence. They had supported humanity's banishment because the evidence had shown humans to be dangerous and unpredictable. Prime Crystal Cathara, the leader of the Zephyrian government, decided to review the old records from the Terra Proxima War. she found disturbed her greatly. Many of the documents that had been used to condemn humanity were missing or had been altered. The evidence that painted humans as aggressors had come primarily from Cathari sources. "Something is wrong here," Kathira announced to her council. Her voice rang like beautiful music as it resonated through her crystal body. "The records do not match what we have been told. We need to investigate further." Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity's homeworld that had been isolated for 3 centuries, something miraculous was happening. The monitoring stations that watched the borders of their solar system began detecting incoming signals. Ships were approaching from deep space. But these were not invasion fleets. Dr. Han Ji-woo, Earth's chief astronomer, could hardly believe what he was seeing. "There are dozens of them," he reported to the Global Defense Council. "Ships from the Andromedan Federation, the Spiral Alliance, even some independent worlds. They're all requesting permission to enter our system." The messages that accompanied the ships were even more surprising. Species that had never spoken to humans before were asking to meet with Earth's leaders. They wanted to hear humanity's side of the story about the Terra Proxima War. They wanted to learn more about the species that had produced heroes like the crew of the Defiance. President Kim Min-ho, Earth's elected leader, was a descendant of one of the families that had sent volunteers to join the Defiance centuries ago. He had grown up hearing stories about the brave ship and its mission to restore humanity's honor. Now it seemed that mission had finally succeeded. "Prepare for diplomatic contact," Minho ordered his advisors. "Today, after 300 years, the galaxy wants to talk to us again." But not everyone was happy about these developments. In the hive cities of the Cathari Collective, Overmind Zekthal was growing concerned. The story of the human sacrifice was causing problems throughout Cathari space. Some of the sub-collectives were beginning to question the official version of events that had led to humanity's banishment. Worker Drone Melter, part of a mining collective on the edge of Cathari space, had heard the Vailani broadcasts. For the first time in his life, he began to think thoughts that were not shared by the greater hive mind. He wondered if the humans had really been the villains in the old war, or if his people had lied about what had happened. These individual thoughts spread like a virus through the Cathari Collective, causing confusion and doubt where there had once been certainty and unity. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had not seen such chaos in over 1,000 years. Representatives from 947 different species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a thunderous noise as they argued about humanity's fate. The hall itself was a marvel of engineering, built inside a hollow asteroid that floated in neutral space between the major galactic powers. At the center of the hall stood Ambassador Choi Sahi, the first human to address the Galactic Council in 3 centuries. She was a small woman compared to many of the alien representatives around her, but her voice carried clearly through the chamber's advanced sound system. In her hands, she held a data crystal, containing evidence that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans. Sahi had been chosen carefully for this moment. She was a descendant of diplomats who had served Earth before the banishment, and she had spent her entire life studying galactic law and alien cultures. More importantly, she had been aboard one of the ships that received the Defiance's final transmission before the warship destroyed itself to save the Vailani colony. "Honored representatives," Sahi began, her voice steady despite the enormous pressure she felt. "I stand before you today not to ask for pity, but to present evidence that my people were wrongly accused and unjustly punished." The chamber fell silent as she activated the holographic display at the center of the hall. Images began to appear in the air above the representatives' heads, showing star charts, battle records, and communication logs from the Terra Proxima War. These records were recovered from the wreckage of Cathari ships destroyed during recent conflicts, Sahi explained. They show the true sequence of events that led to the war 300 years ago. Prime Crystal Cathera of the Zephyrian Republic leaned forward in her crystalline seat. Her people had been among the strongest supporters of humanity's banishment. But recent discoveries had made her question that decision. "What do these records show?" she asked, her voice ringing like wind chimes. Sahi manipulated the holographic display, showing a series of military communications. The Cathari collective had been expanding aggressively into the Proxima sector for decades before humans arrived. They had already destroyed 3 peaceful civilizations and were threatening several others. When human colonists tried to establish settlements in the region, they were defending themselves and their neighbors against Cathari expansion. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many species had believed for centuries that humans had been the aggressors in the Proxima conflict. From the Cathari section of the hall, Overmind Zekthal rose to speak. The massive insect-like being towered over the other representatives, its forearms gesturing angrily. "These records are fabrications," Zekthal declared, its voice speaking for the billions of minds that made up the Cathari collective. "Humans have always been violent and deceptive. This is merely another example of their dishonesty." But Sahi was prepared for this response. She activated another section of the holographic display, showing detailed technical analyses of the recovered data. "The records have been verified by independent experts from 12 different species," she said calmly. "The quantum signatures match Cathari technology perfectly. These documents are genuine." Elder Thren of the Velani Council stood up slowly, his silver form glowing with inner light. "There is something else the Council must consider," he said. "The actions of the human ship Defiance prove that this species is capable of great nobility. They died to save strangers, asking nothing in return." Captain Song Yuna, who had been invited to testify about the battle, stepped forward. "I was there," she said simply. "I saw human warriors choose death over dishonor. They could have escaped, but they stayed to protect my people. If humans are truly violent and selfish, why would they make such a sacrifice?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Many of the representatives began to shift uncomfortably in their seats as they considered the implications. But the most dramatic moment came when worker Drone Meltar of the Cathari Mining Collective requested permission to speak. This caused a sensation in the hall, because individual Cathari almost never spoke against the Overmind. The hive mind was supposed to think as one, with no dissenting voices. Meltar stepped forward, smaller form dwarfed by the massive Overmind. "I have been investigating the old records in our archives," it said, its voice shaking with fear and determination. "Many documents from the Proxima War have been deleted or altered. The truth has been hidden from us." Overmind Zekthal turned toward Meltar with fury blazing in its compound eyes. "You speak heresy," it hissed. "Return to the collective immediately." Halt. But Meltar stood its ground. "No," it said, and that single word sent shockwaves through the Cathari delegation. "Have seen the evidence. We were the aggressors. We started the war, and then we blamed the humans for defending themselves. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic." Throughout the Cathari section of the hall, individual drones began to break away from the hive mind, choosing to think for themselves for the first time in their lives. The Overmind's control began to fragment as doubt spread through the collective like a virus. Ambassador Sahi watched this unfold with amazement and sadness. She had not intended to destroy the Cathari collective, but the truth was a powerful force that could not be contained once it was released. The vote was called 3 days later. After heated debates and careful examination of all the evidence, when the results were announced, the hall erupted in cheers and celebration. Humanity's banishment was officially ended. The vote count appeared on the massive holographic display above the Galactic Council chamber. 847 species. In favor of ending humanity's banishment, 23 against, and 12 abstentions. The number was not lost on anyone present. 847 votes. It's exactly matching the number of souls who had died aboard the Defiance to save strangers. Ambassador Choi Sahi felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the results. 3 centuries of isolation were finally ending. Around her, representatives from dozens of species stood and applauded, their various forms of celebration creating a symphony of sounds that filled the Great Hall. The first signal to reach Earth came just hours after the vote. Dr. Han Ju-woo was working late in the Global Communications Center when every screen in the facility suddenly lit up with the same message. The words appeared in perfect Korean, English, Mandarin, and dozens of other human languages. "To the people of Earth, Your banishment is ended. Welcome back to the galactic community. Gyu ran through the corridors of the facility, shouting the news to anyone who would listen. Within minutes, celebration bells were ringing in every city on Earth. People poured into the streets, crying and laughing and embracing strangers. Children who had been born in isolation looked up at the stars and knew that they would finally be able to travel among them. President Kim Min-ho stood on the balcony of the global government building in Seoul, addressing billions of people through worldwide broadcasts. Behind him, the ancient hyperspace beacon that had been dark for 300 years suddenly flared to life, its blue light visible even in the daytime sky. "My fellow humans," Min-ho said, his voice carrying across the planet, "today we honor the memory of Admiral Kim Ji-ho and the crew of the Defiance. Their sacrifice has given us back our place among the stars." But even as Earth celebrated, the real work was just beginning. The galaxy had changed dramatically during humanity's exile. New alliances had formed, technologies had advanced, and political situations had shifted. Humanity would need to find its place in this new reality. The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Song Yuna of the Vailani arrived at Earth. Just 1 week after the vote, commanding a small fleet of relief ships. But these vessels were not carrying supplies for Earth. Instead, they were loaded with medical equipment, food, and emergency shelters destined for the worlds affected by the Cathari Civil War. "We request permission for human ships to join our humanitarian mission," Yuna announced to President Min-ho during their first meeting. "The galaxy needs healers and protectors now, not more warriors." The irony was not lost on anyone. Humanity's first mission after regaining their freedom would be to help the very species that had kept them imprisoned for 3 centuries. Commander Han Ji-woo, a descendant of the Defiance's original crew, was chosen to lead the first human fleet to leave the solar system in 300 years. But instead of warships, his fleet consisted of hospital ships, supply vessels, and engineering craft designed to rebuild damaged worlds. The flagship of this new fleet was named the New Dawn, and it carried something precious in its cargo bay, the battle flag of the Defiance, recovered from the wreckage by Vailani search teams. The flag would serve as a reminder of the price that had been paid for this second chance. As the human fleet prepared to depart, messages of support arrived from across the galaxy. The crystalline beings of Zephyros sent technical specifications for advanced medical equipment. The plant-like Verdani offered seeds that could grow food on damaged worlds. Even some of the Kethari subcollectives that had broken away from the Overmind sent requests for human assistance in rebuilding their shattered society. The launch day was declared a global holiday on Earth. Millions of people gathered at spaceports around the world to watch the ships depart. Children held up signs with pictures of Admiral Ji-ho and the Defiance. Veterans of the old space program, now ancient but still proud, saluted as the vessels lifted off. Ji-woo stood on the bridge of the New Dawn as his ship passed through the outer edge of the solar system. For the first time in 3 centuries, a human vessel was crossing into galactic space freely and legally. Behind him, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Park Salmon from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Andromedon Medical Station. They're requesting immediate assistance with refugee casualties from the Kethari conflicts." Gu nodded and settled into his command chair. Set course for Andromeda. Maximum speed. As the New Dawn and its escort ships jumped into hyperspace, their destination was not conquest or glory, but mercy and healing. The galaxy had feared humanity's capacity for violence, but they had forgotten humanity's capacity for compassion. Cathari Overmind, watching from its broken hive worlds, finally understood what it had truly lost when it chose to banish humanity. The humans had not returned as conquerors seeking revenge. They had returned as the protectors they had always been, ready to defend the innocent and heal the wounded. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not won through superior weapons or clever tactics. It was won through the simple act of choosing to do what was right even when it cost everything.